10 from the Auditor General of Canada that have been tabled today, October 21st, 2025.
All from the Office of the Auditor General. Karen Hogan, Auditor General of Canada. Nice to see you and your team here, whom I will introduce. Andrew Hayes, Deputy Auditor General. Jean Goulet, Principal. Gabrielle Lombardi, Principal. Nicholas Swales, Principal. Glenn Wheeler, Principal. Mathieu Lequet, Director. Welcome all. Thank you for coming in. This meeting is now in public. It is the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. We're going to try to have three rounds this morning, each one approximately 20 to 25 minutes. The first consists of 3 members, 6 minutes each. Mr. Detel, I understand you'll lead us off and you'll be splitting your time. I will look for your signal for you to let me when you're splitting your time, or do you want me to interrupt you after 3 minutes? You'll let me know. Very good. 3 minutes, 6 minutes, Mr. Detel.
6 minutes, Mr. Detel. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Ms. Hogan, you should have interrupted me. You know this. You know these proceedings better than I do. I am sorry. There you go. We're so excited to get going. So, Ms. Hogan, I understand you have an opening statement for us.
I do have opening remarks. The member will have to wait a few minutes. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to begin by recognizing that we are meted on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I am grateful for the contributions and stewardship of Indigenous peoples across Canada who, for generations, have cared for the lands they call home. We are here to discuss the findings of 6 reports that my office released this morning. This release also includes a message to mark the halfway point in my 10-year mandate as Auditor General of Canada. Je vais me pencher en premier.
I will begin with our audit of the Canada Revenue Agency's contact centres and whether they provided Canadians with timely and accurate information about personnel taxes, about benefits, and also about business taxes. The Canada Revenue Agency has a duty to help individuals and businesses meet their tax obligations and to access benefits. I am concerned that in spite of a new call system and other improvements, Canadians are still waiting too long to get answers to their tax questions. During the last fiscal year, callers choosing to speak with an agent waited on average 31 minutes, more than twice as long as the agency's service standard of 15 minutes. When callers did reach an agent, they were often provided with inaccurate information.
Placed calls to contact centres and asked general or non-account specific questions. We found agents' responses to individual tax questions were accurate only 17% of the time, and business tax or benefit questions were accurate just over half of the time. To test the accuracy of agents' responses to account-specific questions, we reviewed a sample of recorded conversations. We found that the accuracy was much higher when questions pertained to specific accounts. Turning now to our 2 audits of programs related to the Canadian Armed Forces. The first focused on whether the forces recruited and trained enough members to meet operational requirements. Between 2022 and 2025, the Canadian Armed Forces fell short of their target by about 4,700 recruits. Though the forces were able to attract thousands of applicants, only 1 in 13 started basic training. Les forces ne savent pas toujours pourquoi.
The armed forces also did not have sufficient basic training. And without this information, that knowledge, the Canadian forces are not able to determine what needs to be done to increase the number of successful candidates. As I said, the armed forces also did not have sufficient basic training capacity to meet the demand if the recruitment targets had been met. The challenge attracting and training enough highly skilled recruits to staff many occupations, such as pilots and ammunition technicians, could affect the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force's ability to respond to threats, emergencies, or conflicts and accomplish their missions.
Canada's military forces focused on housing. Overall, we found that National Defence did not manage living accommodations to meet the operational requirements or respond to the needs of the Canadian Armed Forces members and their families. National Defence did not have enough living spaces at the right locations, including quarters that met its own standards for living space per person. We also found that some buildings were in poor condition, lacking basic amenities such as safe drinking water and working toilets. De plus, l'Agence de logement des forces
In
canadiennes.
addition, the Canadian Forces Housing Agency, which manages residential housing units on bases, did not plan to build enough new housing units to fill existing gaps. Canadian Armed Forces members can be required to move frequently. It is important for their morale and their well-being that they can access affordable housing in good condition with sufficient living space for themselves and their families. Our next audit examined whether the federal government had the tools in place to protect its IT networks and systems against cyber attacks. While the government did have a comprehensive strategy, there were gaps in some areas, such as cybersecurity defense services and response during active cyber attacks.
Organizations are not required to use the cybersecurity defenses offered by Shared Services Canada and Communications Security Establishment Canada. Though some have opted in, this inconsistent use of services has resulted in fragmented cybersecurity landscape that could undermine the federal government's ability to protect critical information and manage risks. We also found coordination among the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat, the Communications Security Establishment Canada, and Shared Services Canada was too slow during active cyber attacks. Slow coordination and limited information sharing during a recent major attack delayed the government's response, extending the time during which the attacker had access to public servants' personal information. Malicious actions, external events, and attacks involving the Canadian government's digital systems are becoming more sophisticated and frequent. Une approche coordonnée et
A coordinated and comprehensive approach to the government's cybersecurity posture, better collaboration, and a current inventory of IT assets are key to safeguarding Canadians' information and their trust in government, in IT systems. Let us now move on to the audit, which looked at whether Employment and Social Development Canada fulfilled its responsibilities to support early learning and childcare across Canada. The federal government committed $35 billion to provinces, territories, and Indigenous partners over 5 years to support the creation of affordable and accessible childcare spaces. As of March 2024, parents' out-of-pocket fees for these spaces had been reduced to about $16.50 per day.
Approximately 112,000 new childcare spaces as of March 2024. However, with less than 2 years left, there is a risk that the goal of creating 250,000 new spaces will not be met. Important progress has been made in bringing down childcare costs to parents. However, Employment and Social Development Canada needs to collect consistent and comparable data across the country to track the program's overall performance, inform future decisions, and support Canadian families. Dans notre dernier audit publié aujourd'hui,
In another audit published today, we did a follow-up that examined Indigenous and Canada's Services Canada progress to address 34 recommendations from 6 audits conducted since 2015. Programs to First Nations is a decades-long concern for my office. Despite its almost doubling Indigenous Services Canada's spending on programs over the last 5 years, we found unsatisfactory progress. More than half of recommendations to address long-standing issues critical to the health and well-being of First Nations communities. 20 years after my office first identified concerns with drinking water quality in First Nations communities, 35 long-term advisories remain in effect, including 9 that have been in place for a decade or longer.
Fewer emergency services agreements in place today than in 2022. These agreements are essential for timely coordinated responses to events such as wildfires and floods, while mitigating the disruption to people's lives and damage to critical infrastructure. Sustained focus from Indigenous Services Canada to rethink how it delivers programs while collaborating with First Nations to improve their capacity is an important step to resolving the persistent issues, improve outcomes, and advance reconciliation. As I look ahead to the second half of my mandate, my unwavering goal remains that my office will continue to provide nonpartisan, fact-based information to parliamentarians and the federal public service so that they can more easily adjust and best direct resources towards outcomes that serve the diverse needs of Canada's people. The intention is to be constructive and focused on the pursuit of excellence and accountability for the public service. This has been the focus of my first 5 years leading the Office of the Auditor General of Canada, and it will remain my focus for the next 5. Thank you. Merci.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for those opening remarks, and I apologize again for skipping over, particularly on your fifth anniversary. Congratulations are in order. I will now begin with Mr. Deltel, as I'd originally explained. 6 minutes, please. Merci beaucoup.
And I want to say this. Congratulations to you, colleagues. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to congratulate you on your mandate. The first 5 years have been important. We have no problem with some things as Canadians, but when Canadians are harassed by the CRA, it is a terrible situation, particularly when they don't have good information and they can't access that information at the call center. What we are hearing is the level of mediocrity that exists at the CRA. Only 5% of the cases respected the service standards that had been established for the CRA. 4 times out of 5, the information that people got wasn't right. 17% of questions and information given about taxpayers was not the proper information that they needed. And therefore, the respect for the Canadian taxpayer has not been provided. They say that there is shift work that is being done, but I am not convinced. How have we gotten to this level of mediocrity? That represents some 10% of what the workers are doing. To my mind, this is an agency that definitely would like to provide better service, and I understand the frustration of Canadians when they have a very long wait time to get answers. In a system where it is the responsibility of taxpayers to provide information on a timely basis to the CRA, people should be able to contact, if need be, the agents of the CRA, and they expect to get an exact answer and exact information during a reasonable time frame. And there is a great deal of improvement that can be made at the CRA. Well, yes, the telephone system has a value that's gone from $50 to $110 million. That's their telephone system that was supposed to be improved. And the people are still waiting far too long to get answers. Do you think that there can be an improvement to be made here? When you have 18% of people that have to wait 15 minutes or longer, the service standard that was established by the CRA, well, as to the management of the contract itself, it's not just a matter of the number of CRA officers that are there, but also the use of the tools that are available to officers to improve the situation. I saw so many red flags with this particular contract that I thought we should look more closely at the contract at the call centers that are managed by Shared Services Canada, but until 26. But there is a need for more exactness, reasonable time frames, and I think that that has to be looked at more clearly.
There are three things certain in life today: death, taxes, and you will wait on hold when you call the CRA. Another damning report that Canadians continue to pay more and get less. The average wait time is 31 minutes. The service standard is met only 18% of the time within 15 minutes, despite a 2017 effort of CRA's efforts to block calls. 8.6 million calls were deflected where individuals did not have an opportunity to speak to an agent. As far as accuracy is concerned, only 54% of the time accurate information was given, and 17% of the time relative to tax-specific questions. The priority for the CRA is breaks, in that it was shown that the CRA placed greater importance on how closely they adhered to their schedule for their shift and breaks than the accuracy and completeness of the calls that were provided. In one call recording, after 9 minutes, the agent remarked that the personal information authentication was taking too long for a 90-year-old caller who was having difficulty finding and recalling the correct answers. So why should Canadians tolerate this unacceptable service?
I think there's lots of opportunities within Canada Revenue Agency to improve how they provide service to Canadians, and having only about 10% of an agent's annual performance review based on the accuracy and completeness of their responses, in my mind, does not encourage a good culture where accuracy and completeness is top of mind. In Canada, our tax system is a voluntary one, and Canadians are expected to provide their tax returns on time with accurate information. And I think in return, they should expect that the Canada Revenue Agency will be available in a timely fashion and provide them with accurate information. And what we're seeing is that is not the case. This was meant to be a follow-up to see if things had improved since 2017. And I would say that if you're calling about a general question, they haven't gotten better. But if you are calling about specific things about your account, you will get an accurate answer. However, the My Account creation was meant to take calls away from a call center, and a majority of the calls received by the call center right now are trying to access My Account. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to make this more efficient for Canadian taxpayers.
Thank you.
A quick follow-up, or are you good?
Sure. The contract with IBM quadrupled from $50 million over 10 years to $190 million. When asked as well, neither Shared Services Canada nor the Canada Revenue Agency could confirm whether the invoice levels of activity, which were the basis for the charges invoiced to the agency, were accurate. So we're seeing the same type of practices not being followed that we saw in a Arrive scam. When will this government learn, and will Canadians ever get value for money?
Well, when we set out to do this audit, we were actually looking at the accuracy and timeliness of CRA's responses, but obviously we wanted to turn to whether or not the call center was providing good value for money. When we looked at the contract, which started at $50 million and is now estimated to be valued at $190 million, it does represent services for 3 departments. So the Canada Revenue Agency is about 30% of that value. But we found that invoices received very little scrutiny. And as you mentioned, that Shared Services and Canada Revenue Agency didn't verify the accuracy of what was being charged. So there were enough red flags here for me, and my inability to conclude on value for money is such that I will be starting an audit on the management of this contract so that it would inform the future contract for call center services that Shared Services Canada has just released.
I'm thrilled.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much, Ms. Cousy. Up next is Mr. Osborne, please. You have the floor for about 6 minutes.
Thank you, and congratulations, Ms. Hogan, on your 5 years.
Thank you.
Look forward to your next 5. My first question is on the early learning and childcare system, and I do have an interest in this. When I was Minister of Education and Early Childhood Education in Newfoundland, we reached an agreement with the federal government. You raised a concern about whether or not the number of spaces can be created in the next 2 years. Just from personal experience, I know we had gone to $10 a day in Newfoundland and Labrador. That created not only the success of the program, but the challenge that it was more affordable and more people were signing up, creating a longer wait list. But we also increased exponentially the number of seats available in training institutions for early childhood educators. It's a 2-year program. You can't knit an early childhood educator overnight. So catching up with the number of educators required takes time. I know I checked back recently with the province. They've seen a huge increase of graduates, and that is expected to continue. Have you looked at that aspect when you raised concerns for the number of spaces that would be created over the next 2 years?
I mean, you're correct. There is a trade-off when you reduce the cost. The demand goes up, and then there's this ripple effect that impacts so many other areas of the industry. The difficult part with the way this program is run is that education, and in this case, early childhood education and care, is a provincial or territorial jurisdiction. So all I can look at is what the federal government money is being used for, and whether or not the federal government is receiving the information to show taxpayers that value for money was received. So when it comes to the additional spaces, a little less than half of the 250,000, which are the goal of this program, have been created, and there's just 2 years left to the 5-year horizon. So I do believe there is a risk that not all the spots will be created. But the federal government wasn't gathering information on whether or not new spots that were even created had been occupied by parents. And in fact, they had to turn to reports from Statistics Canada to find out whether or not parents were using those spots. And what they found is that in many cases, parents said that the spots were not in in their community, or it didn't meet their work schedule, or didn't have the support that their children needed if they had additional needs. So I think there's a real gap of information that the federal government needs to do better to work with the provinces and territories to get, so that Canada can really speak to the opportunities or the trade-offs of this program, and then talk about the successes or not.
Thank you. My next question is on, I guess, linking housing for our National Defence Canadian Armed Forces with recruitment. And lack of adequate housing may be a recruitment problem as well, if you're looking at them through the same lens. I know in Budget 2024 that I think it was $1.6 billion allocated for housing strategies for national defence. Have you seen any progress on that yet? Should that investment in national defence housing, that strategy that was announced in Budget 2024, address some of the concerns that you've raised?
I guess if I took a step back and talked about these two reports, I would tell you that national defense isn't recruiting enough members to meet its needs. In fact, only 1 in 13 make it to basic training, and there are thousands that apply every year. Is housing one of the concerns that they've raised? Occasionally, but I think the slowness of recruitment has many other issues. But housing is a concern that was raised on retention of existing members, and the National Defence isn't managing its housing portfolio in a way that's going to meet its needs, but also meet the needs of its members. The increased budget was meant to fund a 20-year plan to build housing units and renovate other housing units. So it's got a really long horizon. It would be impossible for me to tell you today if it would be enough. But what I could tell you is a lot of their plans and estimates are based on outdated information. And they should start by at least updating that information and then incorporating the desire to recruit more in order to see whether or not they have enough budget to deal with the housing issues.
Okay. And since your study, I know the government has announced a huge investment in our national defence, including increased wages, better benefits, and addressing some of the concerns that our service men and women have addressed. So that should help with recruitment. I know one of the recent meetings we had, the Lieutenant Governor, the Lieutenant General and the Deputy Minister had indicated they had new recruitment strategies in place as well. So that the increased budget, the recruitment strategies, do you see those addressing the concerns that you've raised in your report?
I think that obviously increasing the salary of our Canadian Armed Forces will improve recruitment, but also retention. And I do think that a recruitment strategy will help. But we identified other weaknesses that could help with recruitment. And I think one of the places to start is to understand why more than half of the people who apply sort of abandon the recruitment process and no longer have contact with the Canadian Armed Forces. Until you understand why individuals are leaving the recruitment process, you can't make changes that will help address. Our report does highlight some changes that were made during the audit, but again, too early to know the kind of impact that it will have on recruitment.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think there's probably not an MP in the legislature that hasn't received calls about the slowness at CRA. I know I spoke with the Secretary of State on that, and he had indicated there was a 100-day plan put in place. From your perspective, CRA's recent steps, such as increasing call capacity and expanding the digital services, can you talk about whether or not they address the gaps that were identified?
Mm-hmm. Those two elements that you raise, I think, are part of the concerns that we've seen, but there are others. I believe that many of the callers don't have the tools they need to actually respond to some of the questions that they receive. And we made some recommendations around improving those tools. I do think that having the evaluation of an agent more focused on the accuracy and completeness of their responses versus adherence to schedules would change the approach and indicate that the culture is one where the Canada Revenue Agency should provide accurate information. So there are many facets. I trust that the 100-day plan, as well as the responses to our recommendations, can only improve the situation for individuals trying to call the Canada Revenue Agency.
Thank you. That is the time, Mr. Osborne, and a little bit extra as well. Suivant, c'est Monsieur Lemire pour environ 6 minutes.
6 minutes.
6 minutes, Mr. Lemire. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hogan, and all your team that have worked so hard. 5 years is a wonderful anniversary to celebrate. We hope in 5 years we'll be here to celebrate your 10th with you. But let me now turn to the very troubling aspects of your report with respect to the CRA, that employees are only able to give exact information in 83% of the instances. But if you are at your post on time and you have your break on time and you complete your shift, you're doing well. But if you're not providing good information to Canadians, that is having a major impact on Canadians and on Quebecers. Surely if they could get 60%, which is the mark that they're given if they do all the things I've enumerated, surely they could get 60% by giving good information to Canadians. How do you explain the fact that since the last audit, things have not changed? Well, the situation has changed depending on the type of question you ask the CRA. If a caller has a general question about tax matters for a business or something else, 17% of the time the answer was correct for about half of the instances, but as rather 97% was correct for the instances. But when there was a more pointed question, like when can I get my benefits, when should I expect them, and so on. So it was very different beyond 80% of the time. So if you call for information that is truly tax-based or related to a tax matter, you will wait a long time, but you should have a good answer. So there is a margin of improvement there. Canada has two official languages. Did you assess the difference in the celerity with which the response was given in one language or another, or the attitude with which it was given? Yes, we did do some test calls for general questions, not related to their taxpayer account. In particular, we didn't see a difference with respect to French or English, neither with respect to the quickness of the answer that was given. Now, IBM Canada, this is the same firm that was involved in the modernization of Phoenix and its payout of benefits. So you're leaning on IBM systems once again. Do you think it would be time to look elsewhere to other firms rather than to a firm that continues to have problems? In Quebec, we launched an audit on SACLIC, and don't you think that there should be a commission of inquiry, perhaps, on what's going on in IBM? Well, I don't know what your definition is of a commission of inquiry, but I can say that when we looked at the management of the contract for this, there were a lot of red flags attached to it. The requests for authentication of invoices, bills, and so on. I'm going to be bringing in that report in 2026 to Parliament. Well, you mentioned that there was an instance of efficiency, but there were 2 good answers given to 6 questions. The others were not good in these robocalls. Do you think that this is a good thing? Well, artificial intelligence has been used by CRA. 2 out of 6 represents 30%, which is better than the general question response overall. But I would like to be able to see an improvement in all areas. Some people are very happy to use AI as a tool. Others are not. And so you have to improve that usage. A person of 87 or 97 who had difficulty expressing why they were calling the service that they needed. Do you envisage the possibility of having a senior citizens-based service at the CRA that would focus on this very vulnerable sector of our population? Well, this is not an assessment that we made. They do have a call center that is north-based on the far north, where you can have, where when you call, you can quite quickly reach an agent when you're calling from the north. But I don't know how you could do that. Perhaps for the persons who are older, there might be a multi-factor authenticity which could come into play, which would encourage them to be able to participate better. Thank you. Thank you.
Which will consist of members asking questions between 2.5 and 5 minutes. I'm going to turn now to Ms. Goodridge. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the team for being here, and congratulations, Ms. Hogan, on your 5-year anniversary. In your report on childcare, you say that the Liberals have fulfilled their responsibilities, and you quote that when it comes to flexibility, but there's no metric on flexibility. And in your report, you actually state that families outside of the standard hours are struggling to find care. So I'm just wondering how you can say that they are meeting their responsibilities.
So I said that the federal funding has led to improvements in early childhood and learning, but it is still time left, right, to decide whether or not all of the responsibilities have been met. The federal funding has helped reduce the cost of childcare. 5 provinces and 3 territories are already at $10 a day, which is ahead of the deadline of 2026. Additional spots have been created, but there's still a lot of work left to be done there. But then it was impossible for me to evaluate other areas, whether it came to accessibility or the quality of childcare. So while the funding's helped improve this situation, there's still room for improvement.
So do we have any idea how many kids are still without care?
Well, all I know is what the federal government received from the provinces and territories, and I can highlight what Statistics Canada would tell you that there in 2021 there was 2.2 million children who were aged 5 years and under, and more than half of them were in childcare, and that it was at an average cost of over $30 a day. So the fact that 112 spots have been created, which is less than half of the target, is why I raised the risk that filling the 250 spots or creating those 2 spots might be very difficult to achieve.
Do you know how many of the new spots are actually filled?
And that's actually a piece of information that the federal government isn't gathering from the provinces and territories. In fact, they turn to another Statistics Canada survey to understand why parents may not be taking up the new spots.
So part of why I asked this is Ontario Auditor General recently studied this, and they actually found that 27% of spots weren't being filled. That's very concerning to me. We're spending a lot of money. The Liberals keep boasting about how much money is being spent. We don't actually know how many kids are actually seeing the benefits of this.
So you actually raised something that I've been working on with some of my colleagues in the Provincial Auditors General Office. We felt that it was important to try and coordinate some of our work on topics exactly like this, where there's a lot of federal funding, but a lot of the heavy lifting happens in the provinces and territories. And so there will be two other provinces who will be looking at this as well. And I think it's important so that you can see the picture from the start to the finish, where the funding comes from and then how it actually happens.
Is there any standard information being collected across the provinces on this?
So there is some information being collected, but what the government did was they allowed every province and territory to provide it in whatever format they want.
Okay, cool.
There's flexibility in the agreements to make sure that they get consistent and standardized information, which is why we recommended that.
So I'm going to shift gears over onto the First Nations report. I found the information in that incredibly troubling. As the Member of Parliament for Fort McMurray Cold Lake wildfire is something that is very familiar to me. You stated that not all provinces have wildfire agreements. Which provinces have wildfire agreements?
So there are currently 5 provinces that have wildfire agreements. It's British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario. But I think what's important to note that it doesn't mean that every First Nations community in that province is signed on to that service agreement.
Okay, so then in my home province of Alberta, how many First Nations are without?
So
that aren't covered
I don't
under that
have
agreement?
that specific level of information. I'm going to see if perhaps Glenn can add in something there.
In the province of Alberta, 25 of the 48 First Nations are not covered
So
by that
half.
agreement. So about half. Yeah,
Half
correct.
aren't covered under the agreement, and you only have agreement, or the Government of Canada, the Liberals only have agreements with half of the provinces. How many territories are covered?
There are no territories that have agreements. And
So
I
this
think
is an abject failure.
This is why we concluded that the progress on our recommendations from a 2022 report were unsatisfactory. There's a lot of work, and I think that Indigenous Services Canada really needs to rethink how they approach engaging and working with First Nations communities.
And they're trying to get to these tripartite agreements between the province, the nations, and the federal government. How many of those exist? It was announced in the 2019 budget.
So in 2022, we actually looked at agreements, and there was 6 emergency service agreements that had been put in place. None of them were tripartite. They were just moving to tripartite. They were sort of dual party agreements.
So 6 years post announcement in budget, and there's still 0.
Well, right now, what even more concerning is there's less service agreements, right, between 22 and now. And I think a service agreement provides the clarity to First Nations communities on what to expect in an emergency. And even if you're working towards something new, you could renew contracts that expire. You could put something in place to provide some clarity and certainty to First Nations communities.
Thank you. That is the time, I'm afraid, Ms. Goodridge. Up next is Ms. Yip for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. And congratulations to you and your whole team on this 5-year milestone. I was just wondering very quickly, what do you feel is your most significant impact?
I have to admit, I don't think I was expecting that question today. I think that over the last 5 years, we've really changed within the organization and trying to deliver reports that are easier to digest for people. Hopefully you actually want to read them. They're not 8 to 10,000 words. And we are covering topics that I think are so important to Canadians all across the country. We try to look at programs that cover masses, but then also to think about the population that needs it the most, those that are furthest behind, and hopefully encourage the government to bring them forward first. So I feel like I have a lot left to accomplish in the next 5 years, and I hope that Parliament will support me, and studying our reports is one of the best ways you can do that.
Great. So now I'm going to just dive right in. We've heard from our constituents across the country that Canadians don't just want faster phone service, they want easier ways to resolve issues without needing to call the CRA. How does the agency's shift towards digital services like extended chat hours and new account recovery tools align with your recommendations for long-term service improvements?
Well, I think that they are aligned, right? There are many individuals who want to speak with an agent, and then there are many individuals who are quite happy doing the self-service option. So there's an opportunity to improve Charlie, the chatbot. As we looked at, only 2 in 6 questions that we asked, which were general in nature, were accurate, when other publicly available artificial intelligence tools were giving better answers. So I think that our recommendation around improving tools, not just automated tools, but the tools that agents have, so that once you reach an agent, the call can be more efficient and effective. We found that on average, a call lasted about 17 minutes, but 20 to 30% of that time was spent on hold and waiting for someone to find an answer. So there's a lot of opportunities to just improve some of the tools, and that's leveraging technology to make things better. I think the final recommendation we made would be to divert or dedicate the calls that are about trying to access my account. So my account was a portal created so everyone could self-serve when it comes to the Canada Revenue Agency, but it's occupying the majority of the calls made to the call center. So if you could split those up, have some real technical support, but then expertise on answering tax questions, I think it would improve the service.
Okay, I'd like to turn to the cybersecurity report. Why is it that 119 out of 204 federal organizations are not required to use the cybersecurity services offered by Shared Services Canada?
I think it's important to say that there are some effective cyber defense tools out there, and the cyber defense sensors are one of them. It is a policy choice over which federal organizations are required to use the services offered by Shared Services Canada. Out of the 119 that are not required, some have voluntarily adopted some of the tools. They are known to be very effective. But when we ask them, why don't you use the tools? They cited a few reasons, one being a potential impact on their independence. For example, if they were a Crown corporation, using a tool offered by the government could impede their independence. That they felt there was the limited ability to customize these tools, but they were also concerned about the maintenance and support that might be offered from other organizations. Now, I can tell you that I'm one of the most independent offices in the federal government, and while I am responsible for ensuring that I have good cyber defenses, I have adopted the cyber defense sensors because it is a layer over and above what I have already put into place, and I think that Canadians would expect that the federal government will do everything they can to protect their information and the government's information.
Okay. Well, given that some of the Crown corporations may feel like they want to protect themselves, how does that impact on the coordination then?
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the biggest gaps that we identified. While there are tools in place, there are some important gaps that exist in defenses. And when not everyone in the federal family is using all the same cyber defenses, you have a potential vulnerability or weakness. And in fact, the more people who contribute to feeding information about potential attacks just bolster the cyber defenses of the government of Canada. So I think something needs to be done to fix that fragmented approach.
Okay.
Thank you. Follow up, Ms. Yip? If you don't, I can come back to one of your members later. So.
I can come back.
Okay, thank you. Your time was up, but if you had one, I was going to let you go ahead. Suivant encore, c'est M. Lemire pour 2 minutes.
Mr. Lemire, 2 minutes, 30 seconds, please. To the Auditor General, you know as a Quebecer, that the best results are obtained when the various jurisdictions are respected. To look at the case of the child care centres, and Madame Marois comes to mind. If you create more spaces than the demographic analysis allows, 115,000, there is a transfer, unconditional, from the federal government. Does this represent some sort of interference in provincial jurisdiction? Well, it's difficult to look at the results of the situation in Quebec, the transfers to Quebec, because in other provinces the situation is different. Quebec actually had childcare services available on a daily basis. So it depends on how the information is going to be spread and used in the province to improve access to affordable daycare and childcare. And I think that there could be a recommendation where the government could use the modalities that exist in agreements that would be comparable throughout the country. A more type of global or universal approach, because what you want to do is spend money that will be value added for Canadians. We see that the federal bureaucracy has exploded in a variety of programs, CRA, for example. When you send monies to the provinces and territories, you want to be able to deliver the goods. So do you think more should be done to improve housing, for example, on First Nations, where you have flagged in your report that there were difficulties, not just to housing, but also the services that are offered to Indigenous peoples? So should there not be a support for First Nations that does not reflect a passive approach? How can you do this to make what you do for citizens more efficient? Well, I really haven't given thought about how that can be improved throughout the country. I looked at specific programs. But even if the federal money is given to a territory or a province, there has to be accountability for the federal government to be able to show to Canadian taxpayers that their money was well spent. And the level of government has to, the various levels of government have to reach agreement on that. So with respect to your issue, your question about First Nations, we have to first understand their reality. That is really necessary. The approach does not take into account their unique situation, and that has to change in the future. Thank you.
You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
I'd like to say congratulations on your first 5 years, Ms. Hogan, and hopefully your next 5 are as good as your first. I'd like to start on the recruiting for the Canadian military. So on Exhibit 2, we see that out of 191,000 applicants, 103,000 were dropped. So that's a total of 54% of total applicants being dropped, and only 1 in 13 applicants completing basic training. Your report said that CAF doesn't know why these applicants were dropped. Why aren't they obtaining that data?
I mean, that's an excellent question. We really wanted to know why they were falling off at certain points in the process, and that was really the goal of our audit, was to try and figure out how to help them improve or identify if there had been bottlenecks. I think one of the reasons might be because of the time delay. So the standard is supposed to be to treat an application within about 100 to 150 days, and we saw that was almost twice as long. So I would imagine that people, like they do with any job, they apply to sort of abandon that pursuit because they find another employment.
So I did find that out of the 191,000, we almost 15,000 came on board, but that didn't meet the target. We still have a gap of 4,700. That is particularly scary because our CFA isn't equipped. What does that mean for our armed forces if we have a gap of 4,700 personnel?
So you're right, during the period of our audit, only 1 in 13 people who applied ended up starting basic training. I think it's important, and you highlighted exhibit number 2. There's other information in there that talks about over 50,000 applications that are still sort of in the pipeline and being treated. And that's why I think it's important for national defense to figure out why people are dropping off, because you can't make changes to your process if you don't know why people are abandoning it.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to the other military report on the housing Canadian Armed Forces members. So your report shows the National Defense failed to meet housing needs. We're at least 5,200 units short. And the ones that we do have are outdated spaces with no Wi-Fi. Some don't even have functioning sanitary waste systems. We also have stories that members are having to couch surf. And I think the low point is an article that came out in 2022 that said that they were being advised to go to Habitat for Humanity to find housing. I find that concerning. Do you want to elaborate on that?
The National Defense is not managing their housing in a way that will meet their needs or the needs of their members at all. I think what was concerning for me is that we saw the poor condition of so many housing units that I think you and I would not want to live in, and we shouldn't expect that our Canadian Armed Forces members
I think they said they were 60, some of them an average of 60 years old.
Some of the so there's 2 types of buildings. There are quarters, which are meant for basic training and temporary housing or transigent housing. They're not supposed to be long-term. Some people are living in those long-term. Then there are residential units, so a house that's unfurnished. And some of the quarters are over 60 years old. One was built actually in 1930. And when maintenance isn't being done, because we saw that in about 25% of the cases, regular inspections aren't being done, you don't know the needs for maintenance, and then that results in housing that's in poor condition. And as you mentioned, we saw lack of safe water to drink or potable water in buildings, toilets that didn't flush, and exterior walls that needed repairs.
And do we have a number on how many new units were built since the audit?
So I don't have that number handy. What I can tell you is since over the audit period, there has been a reduction in units that are available.
Yeah.
So it's clear that the plan needs to be adjusted in order to meet the needs, and that they need to consider more up-to-date information than what they're using in their plan. Also considering that they want to recruit more than they currently have on force.
So I see also there, like on housing here, 3,800 units will be built over the next 20 years. So this is my next question here. In response to this, we see that a friend of the Prime Minister, an RBC banker, has been appointed to this portfolio at close to $700,000 a year. So my question is that what we need, or do the ministers just need to prioritize the Canadian military for the sake of our security and sovereignty and do their job?
So I think you're talking about the appointment to the agency, the procurement agency for national defense, and they would not be dealing with the building of housing units. There is a special operating agency called the Canadian Forces Housing Agency that deals with the building of units, and they did receive $2.2 billion to fund a plan over 19 years. So it's really too early to know whether or not that will be enough. But I would encourage, as I have in other reports with National Defense, that they update their estimates on a regular basis with accurate information so that they have a better picture of what they need going forward.
Thank you very much. Up next is Ms. Tester-Dirksken. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks so much to our Auditor General and her team, and congratulations on your halfway point. I don't know whether to ask whether it was faster than you anticipated or much longer. Yeah, it went faster. So that means the next 5 years will go even quicker. I want to start by talking about the child care report. And this one touches home for me. I'm the mother of 4 children. They're older now, but I paid a lot of money in childcare while I was going to school and working. So I know the impact it has on Canadian families, and I'm sure many of us in this room do as well. Your report noted overall childcare has become more affordable, in part due to federal funding. The $10 per day childcare goal has been met in 5 provinces, I believe, and the 3 territories as well. Do you have any idea, or can you speculate on what the holdup is in the other half of those provinces that have yet to meet that goal?
So I couldn't speculate. I guess what I would tell you is you're right. There are 5 provinces, Quebec, Newfoundland, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and PEI, that have already reached the $10 per day, and all 3 territories have as well. Now, some of them already had $10 a day before this all started, so I think that's important to point out. I think I would point you to perhaps the Auditor General of Ontario's report, who looked at the results in Ontario to get some more specific information on a province. But it's clear that it takes the cooperation and funding from multiple layers of government and also parents. And I think what's concerning here is that many provinces have flagged the sustainability of this going forward. And that's why we've recommended that the government needs to act now to get more comparable and comprehensive information across the country before you start making future funding decisions, or as you're making those future funding decisions, so that they can be well informed.
Yeah, I noted that your report mentioned lack of information due to uncertainty in provincial and territorial plans. And that was an objective of the funding agreements, I believe, right?
So the funding agreements had a few objectives. It was meant to improve the affordability of spaces, to improve the access, but then also to look at the quality and the inclusive nature. In some of those areas, like access and quality, all the government did was look at plans. And so it's really difficult for me to know whether or not the funding is actually meeting its intended purposes, because the government can't say whether it is. And that's why it's not just about missing information, but the right information, so that you can speak to outcomes. It's one thing to say child care individuals are certified, but are they following training would be the next logical steps. And some of that information is missing to be able to speak to quality and access.
Okay, so because it's actually an objective in the funding agreements, is this a positive onus on the government to be enforcing the collection of that data, or is it something the provinces are supposed to be reporting regularly on their own?
Well, I think it's a joint onus. The provinces have signed on to a funding agreement and agreed that they would make regular reporting, but then the onus is also on the federal government to make sure that that reporting is comprehensive and accurate. So, for example, we saw that funding, we saw good controls. Funding was withheld, or the next tranche of funding was withheld when reports hadn't been received. And once they were received, the money was then flowed to the provinces. What was concerning is the content of that. So, for example, in one case, it talked about childcare spaces for individuals age 6 and over, when this was supposed to fund 5 and under. So just some of that accuracy, and that onus is on the federal government to make sure that the money is being used as intended.
Okay, so the quality of the information that was being provided wasn't necessarily what we should have had. Do you have any ideas on how we can improve gathering that data and information? Is it more policy-based, or is it more culture-based?
Well, the existing funding agreements actually have clauses that call for the sharing of information. And I think it's about sitting down with the provinces and agreeing on exactly what will come, and sort of forcing a consistent approach across all of them about which buckets of information will be provided. We saw this during the pandemic, when the country needed information about individuals who had COVID, and there was an agreement on what to send off. It wasn't always in a timely way, but at least it was possible. So I'm hopeful that the federal government can do that with the provinces and territories to get a better picture across the country.
Great, thank you. And on the same report, I do want to talk about something I just caught in your at a glance, the overall message. You talk a little bit about the accessibility, the equitability of accessibility to childcare spaces. And there was a line in your report, and you said that those spaces may also not be equitably accessible to diverse or vulnerable families. And I note the use of your use of the word may, and I suspect this has to do again with the data collection and information sharing. But can you expand on why you have uncertainty about the equitability of the access of these spaces?
Yeah, I think this speaks exactly to the different, a different definition that was used for accessibility in each or across provinces and territories, but also in the different approaches in reporting back. And this is why having a consistent understanding and agreement with everyone would help. What we found the reporting was telling the federal government is that there are more inclusive spots, but not whether they were even being taken up and who was occupying them. So just some basic information that I think would be easy. The provinces have it, the daycare centers have it. It just needs to make its way to the federal government.
Thank you very much. That is the time. We're now going to begin our third and final round. I'm going to be sticking a little closer to the assigned time because I know the auditor does have an appointment after this, and we're running just a little bit behind schedule, not too bad. So, Mr. Stevenson, you'll kick things off for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to CRA audit. As a CPA in public practice for 26 years, I had many occasions to sit on hold and waste lots of time with waiting for CRA, especially when the service levels have gone down in the last few years. You've got a lot of information in the report. The report specifically showed that how there was number of agents that ballooned in 22, 23, and then they've come back down. Did you see any reasons for the changing of the number of agents and how much, or was that affected by the push to go to self-service with regards to my account and online, or is there other reasons to why the number of agents have decreased?
I think obviously the number of agents and the tools they have a direct impact on the timeliness and the quality of service that's received. We asked Canada Revenue Agency about sort of the fluctuations in the number of agents, and it was based on their budget and the constraints and over periods of time. So the goal was to have people use more self-serve with my account and the chatbot. But as I mentioned previously, it resulted in more calls in just trying to access my account.
Okay, for part of that, well, dealing with several seniors, lots of seniors that are not going to be dealing with online services, and several people that may not even be seniors that are not technically able to deal with those. They're going to be relying much more on these call centers. Mm-hmm. Now, some of the stats that you had in here, you said that only 17% of the non-specific information was actually accurate, and that also that only the annual training and analysis was about 30 minutes per agent, which to me means there's virtually no training on there, which would lead to the quality of the calls. Now, is there any evidence that CRA, giving you all these information, that they actually have programs to, you're saying they don't have the tools, so what do they actually have that it was going to increase the quality of these agents going forward?
So I agree with you. I remember I could help my dad with his tax return, but he always preferred calling the Canada Revenue Agency to get an answer. So I can appreciate that many people want to call and speak to someone. They had quality evaluations and those quality evaluations highlighted either gaps in information.
But that's just for statistics. It doesn't say how are they actually training them to get them there.
What was missing from there is that there was very little actionable feedback given to an agent or an agent's supervisor.
Almost no training then.
And as a result, there was very little training. So we made a recommendation about sort of triaging the calls and saying that if it's about my account, put it in one area, different set of trainings and skills needed there, versus if it's about tax questions and meeting your obligations. There's a different set of skills and tools needed there. And we hope that that will help improve the service going forward.
So just going back to that, also, is there any evidence that you showed as to that they were addressing the timing of these calls? I mean, we've got lots of statistics, but as I learned from a stats professor in universities, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. So having the statistics doesn't mean anything if they're not going to actually do something about it and have an ability to help their agents do it. From your analysis, was there anything in there that was saying they're going to actually try and adjust these by giving them, their agents, the tools?
I agree. You can make statistics tell just about any story, and that's why it's important to always balance the statistics that you look at. I think I would point to the evaluation for the agents, and less than 10% of it was placed. Importance was placed on the accuracy and completeness of a response. And when you set that out, the culture that you set out is not one on focusing in on getting the answer right, but one on focusing in on adhering to schedules or meeting call volume. So I think fundamentally they need to start there. What you measure ends up in results, and so you need to measure more accurate, place more importance on accuracy.
You just made a point there on the culture. So would you say that there's a lack of culture to address meeting the taxpayer rights as to getting their rights as a taxpayer satisfied?
I think that's a tricky question to answer because in the Canadian tax system, it's a voluntary system where the onus is placed on you and me and everyone else in the country to provide our tax return with accurate information. Canada Revenue Agency's responsibility is to support taxpayers in doing that. And what we found is that they're waiting too long and not getting accurate responses when they call.
Thank you very much. That is your time, Mr. Stevenson. Up next, Mr. Housefather for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you and happy anniversary. Really appreciate your work. When was the last date at which you collected information for this audit?
The Canada Revenue Agency audit. Our audit period ended on June 30th, but we did conclude that we had all of the information we needed in October.
Okay. And as part of this, you didn't track the 100-day plan that the government has now put into effect, right? Because that sort of, any benefits from that would have come after the date. Have you been able to observe since then any changes that have happened as a result of the 100-day plan that are appreciable changes that you are satisfied with?
So you're right, the 100-day plan was issued after the end of our audit period. So I am aware of it. I looked at it, and that's why I said earlier in combination with that 110-day plan in combination with the actions in response to our recommendations, I hope will improve service time and service quality.
Can I ask a question? One of the things that I found bizarre was Charlie, the chatbot, who, great name, who you said, I'm just going to quote from you, we found that Charlie provided accurate answers on only 2 of the 6 questions we asked it, while other publicly available web conversational artificial intelligence tools answered 5 out of the 6 questions correctly. Like, how is it that the government's tool, specialized for the CRA, is worse than the average tool that anyone else can access anywhere?
It's an excellent question to ask the Canada Revenue Agency. Charlie Chatbot was only populated with real general personal income tax information. So when we did ask questions around business taxes, it had a hard time because of how it was designed. So it's about whether or not they plan on expanding that and completing the population. I think would be a great question to Canada Revenue Agency.
Oh, and definitely, I'm sure we'll all ask it. It's just that you had said it's like paragraph 36, and you'd said that the recommendation for that was paragraph 43, but there's nothing that I found in the recommendations that seemed to suggest that they needed to revise this tool, or, I mean, you certainly talked in general about how they needed to make information more available, but should they change this tool? Should they eliminate Charlie Chat and find another conversant chat tool that will do a better job? Or is it simply a matter that they need to upload more information into this existing tool to allow it to have more comprehensive answers?
Mm-hmm. I think our recommendation really focused in on improving the accuracy and timeliness of responses. It's not right for me to say to the Canada Revenue Agency, you should eliminate or enhance Charlie. That's a management decision. But no matter what tool they choose, I think they have to consider that Canadians, some want self-serve and some want to speak to an agent. Right? So you need to improve the quality and responsiveness of both.
And I agree with that. Like, because personally, I totally prefer not talking to the person. I totally prefer getting the information online. But I get it that there are people like your dad and probably my parent that want to talk to an agent. Can I go to the cybersecurity report for a second? One of the things that again baffled me was the number of federal organizations that are not subject to Treasury Board policies and thus are not required to actually implement all of the cybersecurity services that the government offers. So, for example, when you find that 43 federal organizations representing 36% of those organizations that are not bound by Treasury Board policies are not using the CSE's cybersecurity defense sensors, isn't that deeply problematic that we have federal government organizations that are not availing themselves of tools that the government makes available to protect us from cybersecurity attacks?
So it is a question of policy as to who's required to use these sensors. And the defense sensors are really strong and proven to...
Of those organizations that are not bound by Treasury Board policies are not using the CSE's cybersecurity defense sensors. Isn't that deeply problematic that we have federal government organizations that are not availing themselves of tools that the government makes available to protect us from cybersecurity attacks?
So it is a question of policy as to who's required to use these sensors. And the defense sensors are really strong and proven to be effective. I think what's important is it's not the only layer of defense. The sensors are a layer that you put on top of cyber defenses that you already have. And out of the 119 organizations that don't have to use it, you're right, and about 64% of them are. So they've opted in and seen the value. And this is exactly one of the gaps that we've highlighted, is having this fragmented approach to cyber defenses puts the government somewhat at risk. And, any good cyber defense, it's about having as many people as possible feeding it, right? If everyone reports about potential phishing attacks, all you do is improve and bolster the defenses. And if the whole federal family partook in it, then we would just improve the defenses of the Government of Canada's networks and systems.
Totally agreed. One last question, Ms. Hogan. So when it comes to not using it, did anyone provide from any of these departments that chose not to use it a good reason as to why they didn't avail themselves of the opportunity to use these tools on top of what they already had?
Well, we asked a few of the organizations, some of the departments and agencies, and some of the Crown corporations that weren't using it, and they gave us a few reasons. The first, for some, being that it might potentially impact their independence. For example, if you're a Crown corporation, the need to stay at arm's length from the government. That they were concerned about the limited ability to customize these sensors to meet their needs, and then had some concerns around the support and maintenance that might be offered by Shared Services Canada. What I can tell you is, as the Office of the Auditor General, we are one of the most independent organizations in the government, and I have cyber defenses, and I use the sensors on top of it, because I believe every Canadian would expect every federal organization to do everything they can to protect the information, their personal information or information of the government.
Totally agree.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Housefather. Suivant encore une fois, c'est Monsieur Lemire pour 2 minutes.
Once again, 2 minutes, 30 seconds, Mr. Lemire. I have a question on recruitment for the CAF. You spoke about the issue of diversity in recruiting. Do you know what diversity there is in terms of francophones? We don't have data because I don't think it's required by national defense. Well, Quebec, as opposed to other provinces, Well, no, I don't think we have anything. I apologize, but we could look into it. We could offer you the opportunity to speak to DND. That would be the best source. Thank you. Temiskaming, in 2015, there was a center, 120 people, and the command control center for the 9th Engineers from Montreal was more or less abandoned, and I salute my brother-in-law was involved in that. But these regional recruitment centers that are so necessary, and you flagged them in your report, 1 out of 13 of the people who applied actually were recruited, got hired. Is there some way of offering some sort of a guarantee or changing the system so there would be a better impact? I will let my colleague add something, but activating people who apply to the armed forces is not a problem because there's thousands who do, but only 1 out of 13 get through basic training. Perhaps it's the time that's taken. It's a long process from the time that you apply to the time that your application is processed. But DND really doesn't know why people give up on the process, and that is a major concern. If you have a process and you don't know why people are moving away from the process and abandoning it, do you have something to say? I could just mention this. A question that you might ask of DND, because it's not just in Quebec that this happens. It's throughout Canada. So I think a good question would be to ask why it's taking so long. Yeah, but don't you think having somebody in charge who would be involved with recruitment would be a better approach? But thank you, and thank you.
Mr. Tell's allowing me to take some of his time just off the top. I just want to get a chance, Auditor, for you to make some comments on this follow-up program for First Nations. This document is remarkable because it is so unique. Could you please explain to the committee why you felt it necessary to table such a document, which is kind of outside of the regular audits that your office normally tables to Parliament?
Mm-hmm. I think this was me trying to lead by example and do something differently. I felt that instead of coming back after many years and following up on a topic and saying that many of our findings remain and reissuing recommendations, that I would stop and take a look at 6 audits in important areas that impact First Nations communities, things that most Canadians take for granted, having access to safe drinking water, having access to health services or good oral dental care. I wanted to make a point mid-mandate to see if any progress had been made, so that hopefully by the time I get to the end of my 10 years, I could talk about how the government has rethought its approach to interacting with First Nations communities, and it has actually resulted in some meaningful change. If we remember that the goal of Indigenous Services Canada is to transfer everything to First Nations communities, I think they need to start thinking about different ways to do that.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Detel, vous avez 3 minutes 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. You tabled your document in the House of Commons, and since that time, earlier, there's been a lot of reaction. Are we to understand that your report shines light on the situation of the most vulnerable, rather than just an accountant who knows by heart the ins and outs of fiscal matters? Your report is intended to shine light on the major flaws of the CRA, because 95% of the time people have to wait online. So what is the message you're seeking to send to Canadians with this specific report? I hope that Canadians understand that I recognize and understand myself their frustration. It is the responsibility of each taxpayer to file their taxes. It's very reasonable, therefore, for them to expect to have access to CRA agents on a timely basis and in a timely fashion. And so, with the money that's being spent on these communications and call centers, taxpayers' money, the results should be better. Well, how come there's been such a decline over the past years? There's always been concerns, but why has it so dramatically worsened? Well, we have to say that there have been some improvements since 2017. The introduction of understanding where you are in the queue, your position in the wait time, or also you have an option to wait online or to self-manage. And there are certain other things that have been improved. But with respect to the tax basis per se and the tax aspect, there has been little improvement. There's the importance of exact and complete answers should be accentuated, and that should be the basis on which agents are evaluated and assessed. Thank you very much for your report and for what you have been trying to correct over the past years, because the first victims are always the most vulnerable. And what you are trying to do to improve CRA, I want to bring in, Chair, the following motion. Given the market concerns of the Auditor General with respect to the shortcomings of the CRA and the impact that it has on the need of Canadians to have exact information to answer their questions, that this committee undertake a study to look at the CRA situation, benefits, and the impact that this has on the senior citizens and those people living in difficult situations. That should be dealt with before the end of 2025. The respective representatives of the CRA should be called to appear in a joint session before this committee with the Auditor General. Can you send me this motion, please? Just wait a second.
So the clerks received that it is being sent out. So what normally happens? This is a matter at hand motion. It is an order. We're going to pick this up, but before I excuse the witnesses, I'm just going to take the temperature of the room. I know this is something that has affected all our offices and of course Canadians at large. And as the auditor pointed out in a previous discussion, probably every person in this room. So if there's broad acceptance move with this motion, the government members, Liberals members, have one more slot to ask questions. So I don't want to needlessly deprive them of that if we find agreement quickly. If I find, though, we don't and there's a debate, I will excuse the Auditor General or team, because I know you've got other items on your schedule today. So are there any people that would like to speak to this motion? I see Mr. Osborne, the Priya Prasad. Mr. Osborne, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you know, our Vice Chair may want to speak to this as well, but I have not yet seen this motion. We haven't had time to look at or review, examine the motion, and I'm always hesitant to speak. You can't speak in any sort of educated way to something you have not seen.
Okay, we can come back to you. A copy has been sent to your P9 account if you do want to refer to it. In the meantime, I'll go to Mr. Lemire, please.
Monsieur le Président,
well, Chair, the Bloc certainly supports this motion. Given the circumstances, we see the urgency of the motion because this is something that is in the news right now. It's a matter of urgency. We support it.
Ms. Yip, I will go back to Mr. Deltel afterwards, just in case. I don't want to move things so quickly. I do want to give all members a chance to review the motion before we vote on it. Ms. Yip, you have the floor, please.
I agree with my colleague here. Mr. Osborne, that we need time to review the motion, and we're here to be able to ask questions to the Auditor General on the release of these new reports.
Mr. Dittel, I'll turn back to you if you want to say anything on the motion. You can. You don't have to. You can keep it short, or you can go on about the importance of you think of the motion.
Je pense que comme le si bien dit.
I think, as my colleague, Mr. Lemire, said so well, that people are aware after the testimony that we have heard from Ms. Hogan that there is an issue here. It is a matter of great importance that deals with the reality that 4 out of 5 times people don't get the right answer. This is very troubling, and it's very, very troubling in terms of accountants. The government of Canada wants people to have the correct answers. They don't have to go to an accountant all the time. They ask the question of the government. And this is really something extraordinarily striking. And people have to be aware of that. It's nothing new, but what we heard today confirms the situation. All members, no matter what our political stripe, no matter what our region, all of us receive calls from our constituents who are concerned with the wait time or with the quality of the answers given from the CRA. So I think what we need to do is get down to the very bottom of this matter and see what's what. I would hope that you would be in agreement with me. We'd like to bring in the representatives of the CRA and hear what they have to say about that, and I invite my colleagues to speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see 2 issues with this. One is, if in full transparency, I would have liked to have seen the text that was obviously written. We did not see the text. We're asked to make a decision blindly, which I have a concern with. The other concern is this is eating into our time to ask questions as well. Is this something we can deal with at our next meeting? We have another meeting in 2 days that will give us time to review this. I'm not saying we're against it. We all want what's best here, but we have not yet seen this.
Thank you very much. Clerk, please call the question on the motion.
Mr. Housefather?
Yes.
Mr. Osborne?
Sorry, I was conferring with my colleague here. What was the question?
Yea or nay for the motion?
I'd like to have time to review the motion. Is it appropriate to ask that we do this on Thursday? We may all very well be in favor of this.
Unfortunately, when the question is called, the vote is called. So the motion was put before the committee. I heard what you said about taking it to another day, but the motion is before the committee. In fact, the motion calls for this committee to address this CRA matter on Thursday. That's basically the gist of the motion. What I will do, Mr. Osborne, I will come back to you if I like. In fact, maybe I'll have the clerk come back to Mr. Osborne and perhaps go on the opposition side. Mr. Housefather has indicated a yes vote. We can come back to him as well.
Mr. Dattel?
Oui.
Mr. Couric?
Yes.
Ms. Cousy?
En faveur.
Mr. Lemire?
Oui.
Ms. Tesser-Dirksen?
Yes. In favor.
Ms. Yep?
Yes.
Mr. Osborne? Yes. 8 yes. All in favor.
Very good. It is agreed then. I will now go back to government members. There is one slot remaining, 5 minutes. Is it Mr. Osborne? Are we going back to you? Very good. Mr. Osborne, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to ask a couple of questions and allow my colleague to ask a couple of questions as well. To Ms. Hogan, the Auditor General, I'm concerned with the fact that less than 10% of people that apply through the recruitment process actually make it through the process. Is it as simple as having more recruitment officers to follow up with these individuals? Certainly, I would think that some individuals over the course of time, if they have not been followed up with, may simply fall off the radar, and if they were followed up with by recruitment officers, may in fact continue to go through the process.
I think there's two parts to the answer to that question. Some of it is that the National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces do not know why more than 50% of the people sort of abandon the recruitment process when they start. So I think they first need to do a better job at collecting that information, because you can't improve something or change something if you don't know why people are abandoning it. So some of the other things that we could highlight, however, is that processes were taking, the recruitment process takes way too long. It should be about 100 to 150 days, and it's taking about twice as long. I think it's reasonable to assume that with that length of time, many people have perhaps moved on to find another job, and that happens no matter where you apply. I think that the National Defence, we saw them reaching back out, but when an individual didn't communicate back after a couple of months, they did declare the application voluntarily withdrawn. So I think there's lots of things that impact this, even the process to apply. It's very manual, it's not very automated, so there's an opportunity to improve the tools that support recruitment, in addition to looking at why recruitment is only resulting in 1 in 13 people making it to basic training.
Okay. My second question has to do with the manual input and as opposed to the automated input, and the fact that these systems are not connected.
Mm-hmm.
That's also a concern. So have you looked at the complexity of connecting these systems and having a more automated system? What is required of National Defence to do that?
Mm-hmm. I have to admit, I don't think we expected to see that many systems involved in tracking, training, and recruitment. I think I would summarize it overall by saying that the process lacked automation and could really benefit from some electronic forms and better leveraging of technology. We saw that each, the Army, the Navy, and the Marines, they all tracked their own professional training. So you didn't have a global picture to understand why. And in fact, in some bases, they did it individually as well. So I think there's a real opportunity to get a global picture across national defense. And I do know that they are trying. They put in a new comprehensive system for training, but they didn't make it obligatory. So not many bases were using it. So they have some of the tools, they're just not using them, but then they could leverage technology better.
Thanks. I'm going to take the last few minutes of my colleagues' time. Just a broad question, and this is about your report, the follow-up programs on First Nations. So it's a broad question, but I noted a theme in your report that it seemed in a number of paragraphs, when you were talking about the nursing stations, for example, and the lack of sustained management attention, that it appeared that previous recommendations were acknowledged by the department and that first initial actions were put into place, like there would be assessments done and there would be studies initiated, but that things just trailed off and kind of fell off the radar and next steps were not properly taken. Can you comment on what you see the core problem being that's leading to that type of lack of progress with respect to implementing the recommendations?
Well, I think this was an opportunity for us to sit back and look at 6 reports and say, what are the themes and what do we think are some of the root causes? Because my office has been looking at Indigenous matters for a very long time. We identified 4 barriers. I don't think it's an exhaustive list of barriers, but I think it's 4 important ones. And the one you raised, the lack of sustained management attention, I think is a big one. There is this flurry of activity after we table reports. and there's action plans, and you brought up a great example where they did some surveying and they gathered information, and then the attention to this just dissipates over time. I wonder if it isn't a combination of both the public service and the political arm agreeing on where to go and not redirecting resources or making sure that there's funding to carry this through all the way to the end. So I think that sustained focus is essential. There's a lot of turnover in the public service at times, and that could also see things just falling off the way. I would highlight quickly the other three: lack of clarity around service levels. I think it's important that everyone knows what to expect, and then you can drive towards meeting that outcome. I think the passive and siloed approach that the public service takes is a big contributor to the lack of progress. It really isn't going to get those small communities that need it the most, who are further behind, and moving them forward. And that is directly linked to helping increase the capacity in First Nations communities, not just technical skills, but the capacity to access these programs. So I think if those three are really tackled, but looked at in a different way than the traditional way, we will hopefully see some improvements.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the Auditor General and her team for coming in today. Just 1 second, Mr. Lemire. I'll just thank our witness here. I'm going to excuse them, then I'll hear you before ending up the meeting, because I know Ms. Hogan has a busy afternoon. So thank you very much. It looks like we'll see you on Thursday on the CRA report. You are all excused. I appreciate it. In the meantime, I'll turn to Mr. Lemire with any...
Je voulais rapidement peut-être donner un peu...
Just wanted to speak to the cost of the audits of the Crown corporations. Do the costs appear reasonable, and is it sufficient to allow the auditor to get to the bottom of this? Because we didn't have any questions on Crown corporations. Will that be dealt with later?
No, it's okay. Thank you. Je pense que c'est un rapport que je dois publier.
I think it's a report that I publish every fall, just to provide information on the costs for the annual audits on the financial situation of Crown corporations. I have a budget to do that. Enough to complete those audits on Crown Corps and also on the territories. But we are working in our department to improve our processes and to use technology to allow us to work more quickly, efficiently, and give you more information. Improvement overall.
Adjourned. We'll see you back here on Thursday.